I remember a powerful piece of advice that I got as a young coach: surround yourself with good people. You got to build your board of advisors. Now, for my first 5 years, I did that. I surrounded myself with people who believed in me, who backed me, and they really helped me to kind of believe in myself, to truly pursue coaching, to go after it. And then I realized something. Like, these people were amazing that believed in me, but they didn't know a lot about coaching. So I'd say for the next 5 years, I then surrounded myself mostly with books, right? These authors, these thinkers, these coaches that have written books, they became my mentors. And yet, even the most timely book, the most insightful podcast episode, or a brilliant article that we stumble upon, they're still limited. They don't know you. They don't know what you need in that exact moment. We need more. We need mentors. We need coaches. We need advisors. We need people that are right there in the trenches who we can turn to when we need real personalized help. And that's exactly why we're launching the Coach Gym, an online community designed specifically for coaches like you. Here's what it means for your development. First, you get full access to all of TOC's best content, our entire library of online courses, and the TOC Coach and Culture Certification Program. Everything you need to deepen your expertise. Secondly, you're going to gain access to hundreds of our cutting-edge digital resources. These will save you time and help you be more effective. Think ready-to-use team building activities, team culture assessments, and templates and tools for building a winning culture. And thirdly, this is powerful. You're stepping into a global community of hundreds of philosophically aligned coaches from a variety of sports. This isn't just a place for conversation, though. You'll have direct access to myself, Nate Sanderson, and other culture and leadership experts. We'll be hosting regular virtual office hours where you can come and talk through your specific challenges, plus frequent webinars to unpack the most relevant team culture and leadership hurdles. You'll have a trusted sounding board and a network to truly lean on. Now, we're doing this because learning and development, it's not an event. It's a continuous journey, and we want you, our listeners, to join us on that journey. To learn more and join the Coach Gym, visit tocculture.com. Now, if you're an administrator as well, you can purchase access for your entire program for one simple fee that unlocks access for unlimited amount of coaches. Plus, you'll get your own exclusive school or club community channel. And this means that your coaches can engage with our global community, as well as you'll have your own community where you can share ideas and ask questions specifically within your athletic program. So don't wait. Head to tocculture.com and sign up for your Coach Pass today.
When Jason Street went down the first game of the season, everybody wrote us off. Everybody. And yet here we are at the championship game. 40,000 people out there have also written us off. There are a few out there who do still believe in you. Few will never give up on you. You go back out on the field, those are the people I want in your minds. Those are the people I want in your hearts. Every man at some point in his life is going to lose a battle. He's going to fight and he's going to lose. But what makes him a man is that in the midst of that battle, he does not lose himself. This game is not over. This battle is not over. So let's hear it one more time. Together. Clear eyes, full hearts. Let's go!
So you were just listening to one of my favorite halftime talks from the TV show Friday Night Lights. I'd say the pregame or halftime speeches are probably one of my favorite parts of sports films and TV shows. They tend to always get me fired up. I remember becoming a coach, and when I finally got to become a coach, I probably worked really hard at getting good at these speeches. However, over my first 10 years in coaching, I started to realize that effective coaching, for the most part, was not giving Coach Taylor speeches or something like Al Pacino gives in Any Given Sunday. Effective coaching, effective communication, the pregame and halftime, it's a lot less about leaning into whatever emotion you're feeling at the time and communicating that to your players, there's something more. There's something more in effective coaching in those moments. I think anybody in coaching realizes this. But I think most of us still wonder, what is that? Like, what does my team need at halftime? How can we utilize these pregame and halftime moments to help our team finish the game strong or to spur on some sort of comeback? And that's why I'm excited for the next two episodes of the podcast as we speak to Eamon Devlin. He is a researcher and as much of an expert as anyone I know on effective halftime communication from coaches. Eamon is the founder of Minute 9, a consultancy that helps teams communicate better on game day. He advises teams in the NBA, elite football, rugby, and Gaelic games. He has developed a system of measuring and scoring communication on game day, and he is a PhD candidate on halftime in elite sport. Part one of our conversation with Eamon, we're going to discuss, first off, like how less is more, because before you start thinking about what to do, we probably should talk about what not to do. And then in part two of our conversation with Eamon, we'll talk about how to structure your halftime to build a routine out that helps to maximize your team's performance. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nurbin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Betsy Butterick. The mission of this podcast is to help you become a better leader and build a better team culture. To get the notes to this and every episode of the podcast, all you need to do is subscribe to the Team Culture Toolbox. It's our weekly newsletter. There's also a link in the details of this episode where you can do so at tocculture.com. Also, check out Betsy's blog on Substack at Betsy Butterick. Welcome, Eamon. This is an exciting conversation to have. It's been one that I've been kind of planning for almost a year now since I first met you. How about you just start off with talking a little bit about Minute 9, how you got started, and it's kind of grown already even last year, and you're doing some amazing things in a variety of sports. So yeah, tell us a little bit of the background, the origin story of Minute 9.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me on, JP. Nice to meet you again. Betsy, of course, good to see you again. Minute 9 is a consultancy business which helps teams perform better on communication on match day. So we basically analyze how teams communicate under pressure. We review it, analyze it, and then try to give some recommendations to try to make it better. We don't all succeed, but we have we've an interesting sort of set of clients now. How did I get into this? I get into this. Also, I'm a former lawyer. I'm a recovering lawyer in the finance space. There for 20 odd years. I wasn't a very good lawyer. Then I became a worse lawyer. Then I realized it's time to quit. So I quit 4 years ago. Ended up getting very sick. Sort of lost my whole purpose in life because I was addicted to work. Long story short, ended up getting some very significant sort of psychological treatment. And then I realized why we think certain ways is interesting. So I thought I'll do psychology. So I did a master's in psychology 2.5 years ago. And then 4 years ago, my daughter was playing football, was playing soccer. We're living in Zurich, Switzerland at the time. And her team was getting beat horrendously, 12-0, 15-0, 18-0. I think it was 12 games before they scored their first goal. Until one game, they lost 24-0. And I thought, I'm going to time how long the team talk lasts. And it was 9 minutes long, which is why the business is called Minute 9. But after that game, Zoe, she broke down crying. And frankly, I was crying too, because COVID had just started. She said, I'm done. I said, I can't take coaches make me feel bad about myself. I was still a lawyer at the time, but then when I stopped being a lawyer, I wondered, what's the science behind halftime? So that's how I ended up in halftime.
And when you think back about your experience coaching, playing, what did you hate about halftime and the halftime communication?
Well, my home sport was Gaelic football and also basketball, but I was never a particularly strong player. Usually borderline first team player, mostly bench. So I was just ignored all the time. So I was like, what's the point of being in this room? Nobody looks at me, talks to me. So my self-esteem wasn't great at the beginning of halftime, but usually at the end of halftime, it was even worse, I felt. So yeah, I didn't have very positive experiences. And then I witnessed some horrendous situations where coaches were very tough, stroke brutal to players. Yeah, I witnessed quite a few of those. And then sort of with my daughter's situation, this all kind of sped into something I thought, there must be a better way of doing this. And by the way, I'm not sure if I have the answer to any of this, but at least to look at it and see if if we can analyze what we do and why we do it, and then maybe we can make some changes.
When I think back on my experience as a player at halftime, it was the thing I feared the most. It was, in high school, it was pretty horrendous. Like you said, some of the things that would be said, things that would be done, especially, early 2000s. It was a place, honestly, where I think the coach said, well, I'm shielded, like people can't see me and I can really amp it up even more, It's like a really low bar to be better than those half times, right? So I don't necessarily know I needed a consultant to tell me that I needed to get better at my half times from my head coach. Like just not cussing kids out and throwing things and grabbing players by the jersey is that's the starting point for me. And I wouldn't say that I was great. I look back at my half times as a head basketball coach, and I could say, man, I wasted a lot of half times where I just reminisced, went through airs. I mean, I think at the end of the day, though, like I think a lot of coaches, when we really reflect on it, we go, I don't know if this is really working at all. Like maybe there's the one day it works where you feel like you really lay into your team and they shape up. And then you maybe walk away with some of that bias where like, well, if I really lay into them, there's a chance I can make a change here. I guess in all of this, like part of me just wanted to say like at some point, like just could we skip it? And I actually did like in 2016, I started skipping halftime. We had to wait for the cheerleaders to finish doing their halftime dance for high school, which is a high school American sports thing. But they'd have to do a halftime show, and then the dance team might come out and do a dance show. And then, half the parents would leave because they'd seen their daughters perform, and then it would be just us, but we'd be waiting. We're like, oh, let's just go get shots up. Like, I don't know if we have anything to say, but like, that's where I went to. I was like, I don't even know how to do this well. So I'm just going to start skipping halftime. I don't know. Just can you speak to that of just like coaches and their frustration? Because obviously your work has really hit a chord with people. It's growing. People want you to come in there. They want you to work with their teams. What in your experience has been the thing that coaches get most excited about your work?
Well, I think lots don't, by the way. Lots don't agree with our work, but I think the ones that do. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about skipping half time. So one thing we try to measure, we have a measuring system, scoring system, which I don't think is perfect, but it's a way we think of measuring the impact of communication. And we generally say to coaches, look, if you're managing a Premiership football team, you're probably playing 55 games a year, 55 half times, led by the head coach. On average, in soccer, you're looking at 6 minutes, 10 seconds, the average halftime talk. And no breath is taken. On beginning, boom. At the end, any questions? Do you all agree? Anything else? So, no real attempt to get engagement from players. We always say to coaches, do you have to talk at halftime? Like, and even the precursor to that question is we do in workshops is, and so it's a very basic question, but who is halftime for? Is it for the players? Is it for the coaches? Is it for the fans? Because it can't be for everybody, right? Otherwise, you need to have priorities whenever your focus is. And we generally find the coaches who realize, and this is my personal bias, I think it's for the players. And so therefore, we generally find if coaches believe that sort of line of thought, they normally change their behavior quite a lot. Like if you're ranting for 6 minutes, like what is that? Are you feeling better about yourself? You're offloading some of your own anxieties, your own fears, whereas is that really helping the 14 women in that dressing room? Are they going to leave the dressing room, quicker and stronger? One thing we measure is people's body posture as they walk into their speed of walking into the locker room, and also the speed and their body posture as they walk out. And it's a bit of a rough guide, but if somebody if someone's hunched over and walking very slowly, there might be a suggestion that they're not feeling the best of themselves. And often players are leaving more hunched over after the halftime. which might suggest they're even less ready for the second half than they were 15 minutes earlier. So we would also say to coaches, why do you speak at halftime? And if you are going to speak, is it going to help those people in front of you? And if it's not, then you really are better off saying nothing. And having the few times of having impact.
Eamon, across sport, I know when a team, let's say, was behind and then they end up coming back, they end up winning. Oftentimes in the post-game interview, what reporters want to know is, what did you say to the team at halftime? What's been your experience about when teams change their behavior and they perform better?
Mm-hmm.
Have you uncovered in the research what's a consistent thing that is said or done that facilitates positive performance for a team in the way that they show up after a halftime talk?
Well, if you look at what you can do at halftime, they're basically, sort of boiling it down, you can do effectively three things. One is give players some time and space to relax, and, get some energy on, get some fuel. And the other two is one is information. What information you want to give the players, the technical information. And the other is, let's call the emotional bucket. Like, well, what sort of can you psychologically do to kind of change how they feel? I always say, if it's technical and tactical, somebody in the crowd should be able to work out what you said at halftime. Like, if you've made a tactical switch during your halftime team talk, it should be obvious then what because it's playing out on the pitch. The difficulty is coaches just overdo it. So going back to that 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes roughly of halftime, you're getting up to 1,000 words. That's a bit more than 1,000 words, 140 words. It's a lot of words. So professional football they're now averaging 22 tactical messages a game halftime. And interestingly, we've ran some tests and even asked the coaches, Betsy, do you remember what you said at halftime after the game? Some of it, maybe about a third. Okay, coach, but that was your speech, came out of your head. How are you expecting your players to remember what was said? So I think what we've noticed is the teams that win more often say less. That's the coaching side, broadly as a sort of correlation. And the messages are so straightforward, a 5-year-old can follow them. Because people, if you're living in, if you're losing, what state is the brain under? Is it under stress? Is it under anxiety? So, as you well know, it's harder to listen and understand. So we try and work really hard with coaches to simplify the message, and ideally down to, depending on, we used to say 60 seconds, depends on the sport, but that's our starting point. Look, you try to aim to get to 1 minute speaking.
Eamon, I've got a bit of a tricky question for you. And I'm thinking about a subset of coaches, but I'll give a recent example. Last season, I was on site with a team for their first home preseason match. It was a soccer game. Male coach, female team, and they were losing at halftime. And the coach came in, he'd given the players about 5 minutes. Coach came in and just exploded on them and called a few people out, one by one, stormed out of the locker room. The team comes out and they perform to the level that they are capable of, given their past history, given the talent of the team. They go on to win. And the next day, when he and I were taking a lap around the field, I said, I want to ask you, what was that about yesterday at halftime? Because in the years that I've known you, I've never seen you deploy that kind of communication. And my concern is the newest members of your program, you've now set an expectation that may be what you do at halftime, but also you've created perhaps some uncertainty because their experience of you up until this point has not involved that kind of communication. So tell me what that was about. And he gave, when I say a subset of coaches, he's like, I wanted to create a behavior shift. Like I wanted to piss them off or fire them up so that they would perform differently. That gets reinforced when the team goes on to win, even though the variables that contributed to that success, that W, may be separate from the yelling. So how do you work with coaches who feel like blasting their players at halftime is what's needed to create a positive outcome, knowing that there's other factors that can contribute to that win?
It's a good question. I'll answer the best I can by starting off by saying nobody's ever yet proven a halftime talk positively leads to an outcome of a game. So if in our consulting business, we don't even track whether or not you win or lose the game because it's so many other confounding factors. And what we do track though is the performance of our clients in the first 15 minutes at the beginning of the second half, because that's a period of time where it's still quite close to halftime. So whatever happened at halftime maybe has an impact on the first 15 minutes of the second half. The challenge with going after players or being berating players is what we find in our research is that it's roughly in the male game, in the male elite game of football, you're looking at 1 in 10 players quote like that, like they kind of respond well to the coach having, and then they respond normally by thinking privately, I'm going to show him wrong or her wrong. The real challenge of going after somebody, and that we've got evidence to show this, is that the person next to you thinks that they might be next. So if the coach goes after you in the locker room and says, Betsy, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, and other words which are less, nice, JP thinking like, Christ, am I next here for this? Because the coach doesn't go out, I'm just going to go after you, Betsy, nobody else. There's no signposting to this. Also, if you're friends, your friend might be thinking, that's unfair. Well, why are they going after her? So it kind of, we think it spreads like wildfire, in the sense of, so it's very highly precarious to go after one player, on the basis of, even if that player quote does react well to it, there's a significant chance the other players won't react well to it, which is why we say it's rarely a good place to go. That said, we always recommend the coaches to have what we call the toolbox at halftime. So I'm going to use a sort of DJ analogy, like you're a music DJ at halftime. Got lots of different records in your back pocket, ideally 6. We recommend 6. When you walk into that locker room, you work out what's the best one to play. And unfortunately, you can't preload this because you don't know how the first half's going to go. You don't know the mood of the group that day. You don't know the other factors. But unfortunately, we haven't found the one record that works for each game. So that's why we think coaches have to be quite flexible. And maybe occasionally it is showing your anger. Now, I think a better play in that in today's world, I think, is showing your disappointment. Like showing your disappointment, I think, is now a more powerful way than just being outright angry at somebody. And explaining why you yourself as a coach feel disappointed. I think it'd be very, if the players trust you, I think that can be very powerful. And that doesn't involve, singling out people, doesn't involve, but if it's done well from the heart, it's like, I feel really hurt today. I worked really hard with this team for the last 6 months. I thought you told me you understood the game plan. I asked you several times, but that's not evident from the first half of the performance. So I feel hurt now from you that you hadn't, I haven't created the right environment where you haven't sort of said to me, Eamon, I didn't get the game plan. So I know I feel hurt because, so something along those lines, I think is, well, A, won't get you fired. And B, going after players today in the elite game is precarious because often the agents will get involved. So I know several examples now where you go after a player, the manager will get a call from that player's agent maybe the next day. So it's not an easy place to go. Yeah.
And we're going to unpack some of these tools to put in a coach's toolbox, right? Before we even go into some more tools, which I appreciate that even this the tool of just sharing your feeling of disappointment in a way that is regulated and probably not aiming to just make people feel bad to do better, but it's authentic. But when you think about tools versus structure, like creating a structure of, hey, we do this, right? If I have 15 minutes at halftime, we're going to give players 10 minutes themselves and we're going to talk for 5 minutes. We're going to give them 5 minutes themselves. We're going to talk for 10 minutes or whatever the structure is. Do you propose oftentimes, like as a tool, more structure? Like I for instance, work with a team here in Ireland and it was 1 minute and I had 10 minutes, really, maybe 12 minutes themselves, 1 minute to yourself, 1 minute breath work just to kind of calm, regulate. Then they'd break out in groups. They'd have a 3 to 4 minute conversation with backs and forwards. And then the next 4 minutes was the manager coming in and giving 3 clear points. So hopefully they worked out some of their challenges between the backs and the forwards, and maybe they came together, backs and forwards, and had a quick conversation there. But that was the structure that they followed. Is that a tool that you use, or you think structure becomes limiting to the creativity of and the necessity of coaches to respond to the needs of the team?
Well, if you look at, elite or non-elite, so structures of training, they're normally highly regulated, right? The term highly so structured. We're going to do this gameplay or drill, if that's the right phrase today, at this time, and it's so most of our work now is in professional football, and those are highly, quite timely places. Like players arrive at a certain time, 10 a.m. I see the physios, from 10 to half 10, exactly, 10:31. There's the team meeting, which finishes exactly 11 o'clock, and the players are out on the pitch. It's all very, and then you get to half time, it's just a chaos. It's like, so that was our first, I can say that because they've moved on, the Ancelottis, but that was our work for Real Madrid. It was basically to design a structure for the team, because they didn't have one, and they weren't alone. It seemed, I was surprised, like, wow, okay, we had a look at your entire week, and it's pretty organized and structured, and then you get to this in between thing of games, and it's just like whatever the head coach feels. So the players don't even know, they don't really know what to do, I've realized, because it's controlled by the manager effectively. So yeah, having a time structure, I would argue, for any level would make good sense. Now, and the main questions there around building one are, how long leave the players alone for? What do you want the players to do? What's your expectations of those players when you're not in the room, if anything? Do you want them to discuss the game plan? Do you want them to relax? Do you want them to have a mental break? Another thing then is what your objective, what you're trying to achieve when you walk into the room. Like, I always say to coaches, how do you want your players to feel when they walk back out of the dressing room? Because we spend a lot of time, if you analyze halftime team talks, a lot of it's so technical and tactical. I'm going to offload show you how clever I am because I've done all these UEFA coach courses, but often they don't focus that much on how the players feel. And I think that's an obvious, like when you walk into the room, I always say to coaches, if you can spend 6 seconds looking around the locker room and just looking at the player for a second and using your intuition, go, right, what's the best thing, if anything, I can do today to give those players a slightly better odds in the second half? Mm-hmm. And that may be, that's going back to the kind of, this idea of having tools is like that. Then the way you deliver your half, I'm talking more about the way you deliver your different styles. So the structure, I think, is a non-given. Now, there is one exception, JP. Sorry, maybe there's more. What we call the Control-Alt-Delete moment in a game or in a season, where it's just not gone well. People haven't literally turned up. No one's turned on time. Everything's against you. The weather, the referee, the crowd. And, you see the players walking off and they look like they're walking to a funeral. Maybe that's the moment where you actually cut through your protocol and do something different. Mm-hmm. I can give you some examples of that, but that's a 1 or 2 season, if that many. But generally speaking, having a structure, we generally find then if people have a structure, we've noticed 2 things. One, the players are slightly more relaxed because we track eye movement, we track fidgeting, we track how many words these players speak. So the more structured it is, generally speaking, they're a bit more calm because they know, okay, Betsy's going to appear in exactly 4 minutes' time. So we've got 4 minutes to, speak to each other, get our fuel on, whatever. And also the managers feel slightly more relaxed because they're just following the process.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd mention, if I may, is I was just drafting one before you jumped on for one of our clients, is a checklist at halftime. Like, we've got these what's called 9-point checklists, and that's, and they're not clever, and I think they're as simple as halftime. The first one is you time as a coach. 30 seconds, Betsy, for yourself. Eat something, drink something. Not the players, not your set piece coach, you. Look after yourself. Mm-hmm. Some people play just to kind of calm the brain down. Some people, well-known managers, play So a computer game for a short few seconds, just to kind of, come off the kind of the pressure you're under. The second thing is like looking what subs do we make. It could be, checking injuries, like, are there any injury? So, I think that'd be useful. We find that, say, coaches then find they're slightly less stressed and they're just ticking off the process. There's literally a box tick they go through and they feel they're achieving something, like going through the checklist. Yeah, I've done that. Even if you were losing 4-0. So they might help their self-esteem slightly.
I have a question on this, and there's obviously a lot of different things you could do within that structure, right? This piece of doing nothing, that could be, like you said, just leaving them alone, totally autonomous in that 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, 2 minutes. And there also could be maybe you asking them to have a conversation, right? Discussion, breakdown, like that could be player reviews, it could be in backs, forwards, it could be in leadership groups, whatever it be, okay? I'm really interested from your perspective, when you've gone in there and you've assessed these half times, what you notice around the culture that's needed for that to be effective. I mean, really, honestly, for all the pieces of doing nothing to giving them information to motivating, but like, what are you noticing around all these tools and these structures? Like, what is necessary? How much is culture? Are you able to assess the culture? Is that a piece you're looking at before you kind of come into it? Because I imagine in some situations you could put people and say, hey, have a great conversation there, and they actually are killing each other, and then you come into the room and you're like pulling them off each other, and that actually does happen in some sports teams. So yeah, I'd be really interested in what the cultural requirement is to be able to effectively employ these structures and tools.
Yeah, and look, I've had a very steep learning curve in the last 18 months. One of the many mistakes I've made is assuming that you have a wonderful, like we've kind of, we'll call it kind of a framework protocol, which we're able to kind of prove some performative increase in the second half. Like we're able to prove actually slightly quicker sprint times in the second half, because part of the second half we recommend, so part of the half time is we should recommend that players spend time getting re-warmed up. In fact, we're talking about Gaelic football before this, JP. I mean, Derry, one of the Gaelic teams, if you look at their half time just 2 days ago, they spent 90 seconds on the pitch getting re-warmed up. Like high intense sprinting, not band work or, getting the heart rate up to 90%. So when the whistle goes, the ball's thrown in, those players are probably borderline sweating again. That's one of the mistakes I've made was assuming that, even design some protocol which I think is helpful to players and even maybe coaches, but it depends on what the culture of that sport is like. So we work across mainly 4 sports now. So it's soccer, Gaelic football, hurling, NBA basketball, and rugby. And they're all different cultures, right? And you both know that already. One of the things we try to analyze before we recommend changes is trying to work out how much control does the coaches have over the players, and how much control do the coaches really want to have. Like, so to give you an insight, so if we review a team on match day, one of the things we'll look for is how many questions have the players asked the coaches. And if they haven't asked any questions, then that suggests, frankly, a level of control, or an environment where the players don't feel comfortable. Hey, Betsy, I wasn't quite sure about your, that set play on me to do. Do you mind if I? And then also we track the number of words the coaches speak, or how many coaches speak. With the implication being, if they're saying a lot, then you're probably trying to control. I mean, some people may not like that sort of way of framing it, but that's how we frame it internally, is control. And so if you want a high level of control, the players will be used to that environment. So frankly, leaving them alone for 8 minutes is not going to work, because they're not used to being left alone for 8 minutes. They're not used to being asked, hey, what do you think of this, JP? And, if this is not trained during training, or, genuinely part of the DNA, then I think it's actually probably almost precarious to kind of just leave them alone for that long length of time. So yeah, it does depend. So like, I'll give you 2 extremes. Football, we find very challenging, elite football, for the reason of the academy structures. If you analyze academy football in the US or even in England, players don't get a chance to say much. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's just really broadly what happens. And so, if you don't ask somebody for their view, after a while, they'll probably stop bothering, like, well, what's the point thinking of this? Because Betsy's not going to ask me for my view. And then we also notice in football is coaches might say, well, tell me what you think about this. Or how are you feeling is a very common question. And the coach will usually not even let the player finish their sentence. And so when that question comes around again, well, what's the point of me saying anything? Because the last time I spoke, I wasn't listened to. So I think that's one way to look at JP, is looking at the control level. Like how much, and I guess coaches might see it as support.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as supporting the players, right? But I think it's something more deeper than that. I think it's control.
Yeah, let me a quick follow-up question on that. And I know Betsy's got one coming here too, but it's just, you're talking about less people speaking, less words. That's one thing that I know you advocate, is less coaches talking, less words. And in a healthy success would typically be, you'd say, oh, the players are asking more questions. The players are maybe sharing more of what their perspective or what they're seeing, what they're noticing out there, and some good within the culture. When you see that levels of the players not feeling safe to speak up, when you don't see a healthy environment there, then what are you saying to the coaches? What recommendations do you have for them on that aspect of culture?
Yeah, we probably don't have a fair view of the market, because what we think is happening is the clients let us in are already very open-minded, right? So I don't think it's a very full section of the market, right? We've got, like, for example, we do something called a game day review, which is basically involves 3 of our team going behind the scenes with the team for the full duration of the match day, which is usually 10 hours. And that's getting access to every door, every conversation. And to be frank, not every coach is comfortable with that. But the ones who are, maybe they're already quite reflective. Maybe they're already quite comfortable with skin. Maybe they're already good. I don't know. So there's certain behaviors which that we're really looking for. We always insist, and this sounds cocky, it's not meant to be. Before we work with a team or a manager, we always insist that they have watched back some of their own footage at halftime and pre-game. And you might think, well, that's why do you do that? Well, to be frank, you're probably going to waste some of your federation or your country or club money on us if you're not willing to take that, which I find quite painful myself, looking at my own performance. I don't like it, but I do it because that's one of the ways I know I'll try and get better. So we find that that's a gating question. If coaches are willing to, we also look at any level, just video your own performance. It be in the technical area, be it in the post-game, leave it a day, get the tape. If you've got children, show it to your kids, and they'll give you some feedback.
All right, folks, that's it for today's episode. If you found it valuable, please be sure to share it. Also, check out the coaching notes at tocculture.com, not just for a summary of what was discussed, but in our notes, we put together action plans and action items for you to consider. How do you get those notes? Well, that's easy. You got to subscribe to the Weekly Culture Toolbox, and you can do that at tocculture.com. Please be sure to check out part 2 of our conversation with Eamon. It's going to be another really, really good one, as he helps to lay out effective tools and structures for halftimes. Thanks again for listening. Please be sure to leave us a review as well. Thank you.